Hi there, my name is Ian, and welcome to my YouTube channel. After a few wilderness months, Analogue Productions are back in the SACD game, finally releasing Steely Dan's The Royal Scam, which you can see my review of on this channel, as well as two more titles in their ongoing Genesis series, A Trick of the Tail and Abacab. Today, we're going to take a look at the 1976 album, A Trick of the Tail, the first to feature Phil Collins as lead vocalist after the departure of Peter Gabriel. At the time, many fans and critics thought that Genesis would be finished without Peter's vocals, stage theatrics, and stage presence. Of course, that would turn out to be completely false, and with A Trick of the Tail, we have a great album that proves this band's worth, and every single song on this album works for me. Indeed, this would set the stage for the rest of the band's career, and their greatest success, at least in the commercial sense, would lie ahead. So the first thing to note is that this is an SACD, a Super Audio Compact Disc. And what you have here is a conventional CD with two layers. There's a CD layer as well as an SACD layer. But what we're really interested in is the mastering, and the mastering comes from the original analog tape, and it really shows. And we are going to compare it a little bit to this version, which is the, I'm not sure when this came out, but it was mid-80s, and this is on Atco Records. And honestly, for years, I thought this version sounded really, really good. But after hearing what Analogue Productions was able to do with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, I was actually really curious because I could tell that now The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway from Analogue Productions sounded a lot better than A Trick of the Tail. So I thought, wow, if they can make such a big leap with that album, what can they do with A Trick of the Tail? Another thing to note is that these are the original mixes, and that's the same for Abacab, Selling England by the Pound, and The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. All of these are the original mixes for the first time in print since prior to 2007. So this is kind of a big deal that these are even coming out at all, because what many people have heard and probably own and think of when you say Genesis SACD are the Nick Davis mixes, which are very loud and not particularly faithful to the originals. So what you have here is the original mix, and that is important and crucial to my interest in this release specifically. So I'm going to go through this album and kind of highlight, as I'm talking about the album, some of the reasons why I think that this master is a true improvement over what we've had before. But I can tell you just first off, as a general comment, it sounds very warm, it sounds very inviting, very lifelike, very analog indeed, as the label would suggest. And in comparing these versions, I guess this is like a mid-80s version, as I said, I actually think this version still sounds quite good. But what I noticed right away is that this new SACD version sounds like a blanket has been lifted off of the recording, and I can hear so much greater clarity, especially in the drums. The drums have a lot more heft and power, and the word I would use is thunderous. So for you Phil Collins heads out there, especially Phil Collins drumming, if that's your thing, I think you're going to really be impressed by this. But I also think the bottom end is vastly improved. Not that this previous version was anemic; it's anything but. But the bottom end just feels much tighter and more natural, and I can definitely hear a lot more detail and presence in Mike Rutherford's bass pedals, especially. And those opening few moments of "Dance on a Volcano" just prove how great this master really sounds. Like, I'll be honest with you, the opening song of this album is my favorite Genesis opener of all time. I think they never top "Dance on a Volcano." And I would even go so far that the opening few seconds of this album are some of my favorite opening seconds of any album, definitely any progressive album. And you can hear an improvement right from just the first few seconds of this. The acoustic guitars, presumably, I think those are probably 12 strings played by Rutherford and Steve Hackett. They have a twinkle to them, and they sound very bright and full. I noticed right away that the EQ isn't any different. Like the EQ between these two discs sounds very, very similar. But again, it's just greater clarity, greater dynamics. Like I feel like this new SACD is actually quieter than the 80s mix. Like I had to turn it up a little bit. And I do feel like the dynamic range is greater. Now, I didn't put this into any kind of DAW to look at the waveforms and really do a scientific analysis as some members of, like, say, the Steve Hoffman forums might do. I didn't do any of that. I'm just kind of going off of what I'm hearing. And to me, it sounded like this disc could withstand a lot more volume than the old one. So huge kudos points for that. So on to Entangled. Again, the twinkly guitar parts here sound absolutely bewitching. Phil's voice sounds very natural and warm. Tony Banks' mellotrons kind of fill the room, and the end of this song reaches a loud climax, especially driven by the keyboards. And to me, it's reminiscent of Rick Wakeman's synths from the Down on High in the Heavens moment in Yes is Close to the Edge album. I always thought the drums sound a little bit weird on the track Squonk, but I could never really pinpoint why until now. It's definitely a production choice, and I can hear like a slapback echo or something on them, and I've never noticed that before. It was probably an attempt to homage John Bonham, because obviously the track Squonk owes a lot to Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. I'm not actually a big fan of the drum sound, but that being said, this is actually one of my favorite Genesis tunes. And I noticed especially on this track that I'm hearing a lot more of Steve Hackett's work, and he's kind of driving the song. Genesis fans will know that every album contains the obligatory Tony Banks masterpiece. Madman Moon is this album's answer to that. On this master, it sounds so lush and organic, and it's a perfect example of the more dreamlike, progressive side to Genesis that is lost by the early 80s albums such as Abacab. I also notice a lot of finer detail in the acoustic piano, and some extra percussion and castanets or tambourine in the middle of the song that I've never noticed before. It seems so lifelike, and parts of this tune remind me of some of the instrumental arrangements on the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds album. And I just absolutely love the way that the drums kick in here at the end of the song. It's a brilliant track and one of my very favorites. We move on to Robbery, Assault, and Battery, which is this album's attempt at the Battle of Epping Forest style multi-character story song. I actually like this song a little bit better than Epping Forest, and in this new master, I noticed that the bass sounds nice and fat. Again, I'm also noticing a lot more detail in Steve Hackett's parts, especially in the choruses, and he's using kind of a Hunting Girl style slow phaser tone on his guitars, and those details really add a lot to my appreciation of this material. So in the middle of side 2, we get to Ripples, which in my opinion is this album's answer to Stagnation. But this has an outstanding melancholic chorus. I can tell that this is Tony Banks' work. I think this is a Banks and Rutherford shared track, but the chorus definitely feels like classic Banks to me. Again, the twinkling 12-string guitars sound very natural and gorgeous sounding. The title track, The Trick of the Tail, is one of my absolute favorite Genesis tunes from this era, and I feel like it definitely proves that Genesis always were kind of a pop band. Like, we'll get to this when we talk more about Abacab, but there seems to be no general consensus as to when Genesis made the transition from being a progressive band to a pop band. Some fans say that they always were. And I definitely hear that on this track in particular. I feel like A Trick of the Tail is definitely a meeting of influences between like the Beatles and Brian Wilson's Pet Sounds, like the Beach Boys record. And one thing that kind of caught my ear that I'd never noticed before is that Steve Hackett is playing a guitar figure at the beginning here that's very reminiscent of Getting Better, the Beatles tune from Sgt. Pepper. And I liked hearing the detail of, because if you listen to Getting Better, it's actually two guitars interlocking with one another. Here, they do it with guitar and piano, which is a very creative choice. And again, these are just details that I've never noticed on any prior master. And I love the lush harmonies that come in throughout this track. And it's one of the tracks that keeps me coming back to this album again and again over the years. Finally, we end the record with Los Endos, which is a prog fusion medley with some Santana-style percussion to boot. Steve Hackett's lead playing on this is so creative and interesting, especially here. That dynamic build-up to the squonk reprisal is enormous. This song features an amazing ending, and it's a great way to cap off the album as well, with a cool fade-out jam and Phil reciting the ending lyrics of Supper's Ready, which is a very nice touch. I was just absolutely blown away by what I heard here. Again, like I always thought this album sounded good to begin with, but I feel like Chris Bellman was able to bring out so much more detail and nuance than I'd ever heard before. And it turns up great. I was able to crank it up well beyond a comfortable volume level and not hear any distortion. And it's just great to have this mix back in print. You, of course, can get this from the Acoustic Sounds website, which I will list in the description for you to check out. I think it's very, very, very much worth picking up, as are the other Genesis SACDs in this series, which are Selling England by the Pound, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, A Trick of the Tail, and Abacab, which I will review next, hopefully later on this week. So, yeah, I would love to see more Genesis SACDs on this label. We need to get, and then there were 3, we need to get Duke. Foxtrot and Nursery Crime have been announced, but they haven't been released yet, so I'm hoping those come out very soon. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments, if you think you might pick these up. And if you would like to hear my review of the Abacab SACD as well as Steely Dan's The Royal Scam, you can subscribe to the channel, which is a great way of showing your support and letting me know that it's worth covering these topics and reviewing them. But until then, that's it for me for today. It's been real nice talking to you, and you'll hear from me really soon. Bye-bye, and so long.